Welcome back to the Exempt List on the Zero Blitz podcast feed. Today, we are talking about all things wide receivers. We got 6 weeks into the season. We got data points, we got takes, and we got Yahoo Fantasy's Matt Harmon in to help us break it all down. Let's get right into it. Matt Harmon, how you doing today, pal?
Chuck, what's going on, man? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Yeah, it has been a minute. I don't remember the last podcast we did. It was probably on You Pod to Win the Game before the draft. Or maybe right after the draft, I think we recorded a podcast, right?
Yeah, I think you had to put up with me for like a good solid month on the fantasy show where you helped us break down all the prospects and stuff. Yeah, no, you owe me now that I'm doing this, you owe me a weekly preview episode. So I will be contacting you for that soon. And this year it will be one of the funniest things that's happened on the show between you and I don't know if you remember this, but remember last year when I had you do the 3-man show with Andy? And,
yes.
I'm like, all right, what's the biggest question heading into this game? And Andy's like, well, Jeff Wilson and Jalen Warren's role or whatever. And Charles is like, what the hell? We're talking about we're talking about these number 2 running backs and their touch counts. Like, hey, that's a fantasy football podcast, pal.
Yeah. So it's a bit different over here. I think we've gotten off to a pretty solid start. For those of you who don't know, this is the Exempt List, as you heard in the intro. And we like to have fun around here and goof around. But we are going to get into some actual real deal wide receiver talk. I think one thing that's interesting about where the NFL is right now is it kind of feels like every year you're getting a good wide receiver class, or at least guys who can contribute. So it gives you good things to talk about, bad things to talk about, but a lot of young guys to reflect on, whether they're rookies or sophomores, that we're going to get to in a bit. But first, as we do every week, funny things from the sports weekend. And I think you have to start off with the conspiracy from last night's Cowboys-Chargers game, which I would call like one of the weakest conspiracy theories that I've ever seen. And I don't really get like the point A from point B to even make this a conspiracy theory. So for people who didn't watch the game and for people who are not online on social media, there was a woman.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations for you. And especially congratulations for not watching that game, because it was one of those games where even though the final score was close, it was not a great game, like all the way through. Lots of penalties, lots of just miscues from players that are normally great. It was a kind of weird game. But there's this woman who is one of the rare Chargers fans that exists in the wild, who was going absolutely insane during the game. They caught her going crazy. I think when Gerald Everett scored a touchdown towards the end of the game to tie it at 17, and then when Justin Herbert threw the pick to Stephon Gilmore to ice it, they showed her distraught and despondent. And the Chargers have even made her picture of her, kind of freaking out when the game's over, their profile picture on Twitter, which has led people to, because it's 2023. You can't take anything at face value anymore, right? You have to dig and see if there's any further truth over what you're seeing. It kind of led people to say that this was a conspiracy theory and that she was a paid actor by the NFL to be excited about her favorite team, which to me is like, we're on Twitter every week and we see how amped up people get about their favorite team. I didn't really understand what the point of this conspiracy theory was. And also, this is like low tier conspiracy theory, guys. Like, open up your third eye. I thought we were real crazy on here. This makes no sense.
There's so many things that are funny about this. Number one, it is hilarious that people would believe that she was a paid actor rather than a real Chargers fan.
Yes.
That's just like layup content. I host the show with Austin Eckler for Yahoo, and we were just talking about this, that obviously last night it was like full on mostly Cowboys fans. He's like, yeah, it's just all Cowboys fans in there. It's crazy. Even like that's how unbelievable it is. And somebody would be that invested in a Chargers team that always blows it at the end. Like, I mean, if you're a Chargers fan, and I've watched a ton of Chargers now the last couple of years doing the show with Eckler, and it's like, this is Chargers football, man. How could she possibly think anything else was going to happen other than they were going to blow that at the end of the fourth quarter? That's one part of it, that people would rather believe she's a paid actor than a true diehard. Like, I am living and dying with the Chargers in every moment. But two, who would even come up with that as a conspiracy theory? Is it one of these like BS aggregator accounts that are just like fishing for retweets? At least it's not Taylor Swift, right? Like, weren't we all sick of the Taylor Swift thing? At least we got somebody else on the sideline.
That one was a real conspiracy, though. Where you could kind of like, I think it was dumb as hell. I think it was very stupid. The Taylor Swift, where they were changing the Instagram bios, which they do every single week. After every single game, they change the Instagram bios to make it reflect what happened in the last week of action. But this is the first time that people paid attention to it, so they think it's the first time that ever happened, and they were very frustrated and mad over it. I can kind of see where you go from, okay, the NFL is promoting Taylor Swift at these games. It will be better if the Chiefs won these games when she's in attendance for the popularity of the league. I can kind of see like how a deranged brain gets from point A to point B on that. I don't really
you're broken and flawed as a person, but as a fellow non-perfect person, I get where you can arrive at the point.
I can see where you're driving the car. I think might need to get someone to grab the wheel every once in a while, but you're kind of moving in a straight line. This one, I don't get it. Like there's no juice here. There's no juice here. It's just a woman who's really excited about her team. I think, like you said, people were just kind of surprised at the fact that it was a Chargers fan, and you don't really see many of those even at their own stadium. I thought one of the craziest things about last night was when Herbert threw that interception to Gilmore to end the game. Dude, the stadium erupted like it was a Cowboys home game. Like, it sounded like a college game how loud it was. I guess that's probably the part where people find it unbelievable that there is a person willing to spend their money on the Chargers. But hey, the Vikings have fans, the Falcons have fans. There's a lot of teams that are, always playing blue balls with their fan bases that still get people to spend money on them.
And I guess we could just add the Chargers to the list there. I mean, they are fighting like a real uphill battle. They probably never should have moved to LA to begin with. I was working at the NFL Network at the time when they moved the Rams out there from St. Louis, and then they moved up they didn't move the Chargers. I remember it being like, the Chargers like, we're coming too. As the NFL's even like, whoa. We were not asking for this. And then they're also fighting an uphill battle too, playing against the Cowboys, who Jerry has like made it a point to, they own the Oxnard situation where they go to training camp. So there's a lot of Cowboys fans everywhere, but then especially in LA, that's going to be like an extra layer of problem. So yeah, it's tough, but sometimes the most rational explanation can just be the explanation, and we're allowed to have it be that way. And this woman is just very into the Chargers, and you know what? God bless her.
Yeah, I feel for her. I'm in a similar situation with my favorite team. I feel her pain. It sucks. I mean, I was doing similar motions when Desmond Ridder threw that interception to lose against the Commanders, which, I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later because I can't avoid that team out of my brain. But it is what it is. All I want to say is let's take the stakes a little higher. Come on, it's 2023. The world's falling apart. We can do better than just some woman being excited about the Chargers be a conspiracy theory. This is a team that literally had robots at their game week 1 to promote a movie.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, that's nothing compared to that. Yeah, I mean, give me a break. I tell you what, man, I'm not open to the NFL has paid actors at certain things in certain events in certain situations. I just don't think it's for the LA Chargers, and this is pretty low stakes.
Yeah, very, very low stakes. Something that might have a little bit more legs, and I don't really mean that to make a joke about what I'm about to say, but Aaron Rodgers said this week on the Pat McAfee show, as he goes on there every single Tuesday, that kind of needs to pump the brakes on the idea that Aaron Rodgers will return this year after tearing his Achilles 6 weeks ago, start of September, on September 11th. So like 5 weeks ago, really?
Yep.
Okay. So just to quote Aaron Rodgers from the Pat McAfee show, he said, quote, "We're kind of way ahead in even saying that," Rodgers said. "They're just markers. You saw me walk without crutches and throw on the field. Another marker is going to be jogging, and then another marker is going to be going through a pregame workout, probably, and get on a practice field. All these are going to take time. It's critical markers I have to hit." Sounds very logical. It sounds like it makes a lot of sense. The only reason why this has to be even addressed is because Aaron Rodgers insinuated that he could come back from his Achilles injury when he first tore it. Like,
yeah,
it would have been unprecedented. I mean, even the Cam Akers situation where he tore his Achilles in the summer and then came back for the playoffs. That was an unprecedented situation. This will be even faster than that because we're talking a September to January timeline for a guy who turns 40 in December coming off an Achilles tear. Obviously, you're not going to play the rest of this season. There's no chance. But then to kind of fan the flames on this, you started this. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's the same conversation we've had with Aaron over and over again, where he says something, people react to it. Well, why would people react to it this way? Because you said it, Aaron.
Look, this is another one where we can pull a lot of different threads here. Number one, yeah, I mean, Aaron is out there without the crutches. He's out there throwing before the game last week, right? And you know, he's saying like nobody's attacked this rehab quite like I have, you know, basically insinuating this is going to be something unprecedented. So the next logical leap is, yeah, he's the one who's saying this. Like, this is the classic Aaron Rodgers stuff where you're right. He says something, he's upset that people react to it in the exact way that literally anybody would react to what he said. I did talk about conspiracy theory. I can't remember who said it, but I did see somebody say, like, what if Rodgers just never tore his Achilles? And this is all like to play to play fewer than 65% of the snaps so the Packers don't get a first round pick. It also makes him look like the hero, right? He comes back at the end of the year if the Jets have been mildly competitive, and I think at this point, I think Zach Wilson is functional enough to like have kept them afloat. Rodgers also gets the credit then for being like the mentor that turned around Zach Wilson, because you know that's going to be the storyline, right? Wilson never would have had this level of success without Rodgers being in the building. So now that's a conspiracy theory I can buy into. Probably not the truth, but at least it makes some sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense than like dolphin sex noises helping your therapy for your Achilles injury. You know.
Well, don't speak out of turn. Have you ever heard any dolphin sex noises and track the effect on your physical well-being?
Well, to be honest with you, I did Google them after Aaron spoke about it. And for those of you who don't know, I have a chronic back injury. I have 2 herniated discs in my lower back. So, you know, I just wanted to test Aaron's theory, and my back was still hurting. It was crazy. Like, I was just listening to the sounds of dolphins having sex, and my back was hurting like even a little bit more, I think, because I was starting to get irritated. So yeah, I just don't like the victim complex. And it's not just Aaron that does it, but it's all over the place now. If you say something ridiculous and people start to build an expectation off of what you say, I don't really understand how you can get a little frustrated with people when these are your words. And the proxy war with Travis Kelce over the vaccines, calling him Mr. Pfizer, like
that's terrible. I don't even care what you think. Like, if you have some kind of vaccine stance, you still need to recognize that is like the lamest possible thing we could possibly be talking about in 2023.
Mr. Pfizer. That's what I'm saying. 2023 is almost over. It's October. It's mid-October. Thanksgiving is right around the corner. How are we still doing this? And, you know,
that's the type of stuff that makes people think like Rodgers is just trying to keep himself in the talking point, right? Like in the sphere of discussion or whatever. So, yeah, I couldn't care less about Rodgers wanting to have a debate. And that's the best part too, is like you never look good when you're the guy who says something and then the other person, Kelce in this situation, like laughs it off and just kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. Like he says the Johnson and Johnson thing or whatever. And then like Rodgers comes back with, debate me, bro. Like I'll bring RFK. That nobody ever looks good in that situation.
No, that's enough Aaron Rodgers talk. I felt we spent the whole, offseason talking about him. Last funny thing from the weekend. Tyreek Hill scores a touchdown against the Panthers, has another absolutely monster day, makes another defense look completely silly. He's on track for like 2,300 yards this year. Like quietly. Yeah. I don't know if it's quietly. I don't know if I just haven't been paying attention, but I look at his pace stats. They're pretty ridiculous.
He's averaging 5 yards per route run, which like his yards per route run's not a perfect stat, but yeah.
Yeah, that's not the same as averaging 5 yards a carry.
No.
It's a good deal
every pass play he's out there running an eligible route, just 5 yards. It's pretty berserk. I think he's probably, I know that it'll just end up being a quarterback by the end of the year. So this is all like, completely fake, but you got to at least say like right now he's in the discussion to be an MVP, Tyreek Hill. Just like there is, if we're talking about the literal name most valuable player to his individual team, it's hard to think of somebody that fits the bill more than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. I think like the best non-quarterback options are like Tyreek and McCaffrey this year. Because even that 49ers offense, they kind of fell apart when he got hurt this past weekend. So maybe he's one of the few running backs that matter. But digress. Back to Tyreek. He scores a touchdown against the Panthers, and then he runs off into the end zone. I guess from the story, he ran into someone on his social media team who was on the sidelines, grabbed the phone, did a backflip.
I believe that is the story, yes, that it's someone from his team grabs the phone and does the flip and the whole thing.
Regardless, something the NFL doesn't approve of, right? Because they're not a huge fan of props being used during these celebrations. And I will say that's a rule that they've been fairly consistent on. I mean, going back to like when Joe Horn pulled the phone out of the goalpost to 2 weeks ago when Stephon Diggs poured beer all over himself after scoring a touchdown against the Dolphins. They've been pretty, consistent on the idea that, hey, with the celebrations, don't bring props. You got to keep it all within your own creativity. So the NFL also has a problem where they can't help themselves when someone does something really cool, right?
Yeah.
And they have to post it on. But you also have to post on your social media feeds first. Like you remember when Cam Newton scored the touchdown, when he made a return for the Panthers, they go to Arizona, he scores a touchdown, rips his helmet off and goes, I'm back. That wasn't really back, but for that moment, he was back-ish. Yeah. The NFL goes crazy. They post it all over the social media pages. It was a great moment. And then it ended up being something, oh, wait, Cam, you're not allowed to do that. We have to slap you on the wrist for that. I don't understand why the NFL keeps getting this wrong. So the NFL UK, they posted the clip, then they deleted it when Tyreek Hill is going to get fined. I feel like if your social media team has enough discretion to know that that's something that people would like to see, and it's not offensive, it's not something, it's not a lewd gesture or whatever. It's not, hurting anybody. It's just kind of fun. I feel like this is something the NFL should kind of let go within reason. I understand why they might not want Stephon Diggs pouring beer all over himself during a game. I can get that. But this, it's nothing. Like, it's just a little blip on the radar. And I think this is something that maybe they should let slide because it's also something that they want to show people since they posted on their social media accounts. What do you think?
By the way, this is a great piece of evidence to submit in the case that there is no Taylor Swift conspiracy and that clearly the NFL social media and the NFL league office are not on the same page here for what people want to see. Clearly there's not a direct line of communication, right, between what's going on the pages and what the league office would like to see. I mean, yeah, dude, of course it's stupid and it's gotten to a point where it's so ridiculous that the most minor amount of fun, has got to be taunting or whatever. We want to see these guys taunt. We want to see like them do crazy stuff in the celebration department. I'm totally with it. And I think that, the disconnect there proves the point that we want to make here. By the way, Tyreek Hill's like on pace to have, over 2,000 yards. He's also on pace to lose a lot of money this year. Hasn't he been fined like almost $100,000 for uniform violations too?
Oh yeah. Cause he doesn't want to wear socks.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting.
Interesting. Yeah, which is weird too. I mean, I look, I'm not an NFL athlete, but anytime I did play sports, I was definitely wearing socks and shoot. Like even there's been a few times like, work out in my gym down in the garage and I want to finish it off with a Peloton ride, but I'm not getting on that thing without like putting socks on, you know what I'm saying? So man, number one, disgusting. Number two, I guess if you got it though, you're making like almost $30 million a year. You can go ahead and just be fined $100,000 and it doesn't matter.
I've went sockless to a football practice one time when I was in high school and I was, a grubby little 16-year-old, disgusting as hell. I had run out of clean socks and, at first I thought maybe I could just put one on, but they were so sweaty. I tried to put a dirty one on. I just couldn't do it. So I went sockless to a padded football practice. And I had the worst blisters on my feet.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking about here. The blisters with Tyreek Hill. That's because
he's running fast too.
I don't know, man. That's troubling. That is troubling.
Is he from Florida? Let's see. That's like whenever I see someone do some stuff like that, I always assume like country or Florida.
He's from Georgia. Yeah.
Douglas.
Born in Pearson, Georgia.
Okay, that's a very, very small city. Yeah. I've got some familiarity with that state. Go Falcons, go Bulldogs. But yeah, okay. That actually explains a little bit, because that's some country right there. Just I'm not going to wear socks for an NFL football game, and I'll still be the fastest guy in the field. Yeah, you were outside a lot growing up, for sure. I think that's all we got on the funny things from the weekend. If there's anything we missed, feel free to send a note into the show, leave a review. Would love to hear your thoughts. But now we're going to move on to what I love talking to Matt about, wide receivers. For those of you who don't know, Matt, you started off with reception perception, right? If you just want to walk people through your journey real quick.
Yeah, so I started reception perception about 10 years ago now at this point. Started like kind of putting the process back on the back end. And I first put content out on my website, Backyard Banter. If you're wondering why the BYB is in my Twitter handle, it's from Backyard Banter way back in the day. Most people don't know that. So Reception Perception now is its own standalone website. It went to several other places, like a freelance type of venture. But yeah, receptionperception.com is its own website where I'm charting every single route that these guys run over an 8-game sample, where they line up, how often they take snaps on the line of scrimmage, off the line of scrimmage, in the slot, outside. Because I think, and especially in like a fantasy sense, we talk a lot about like outside, inside receivers and slot versus wide. But there's a big difference between these guys that are running out as your X receiver versus like your flanker, especially now when you can move guys around so much pre-snap, and that's available to all these NFL offenses. So that's a big part of it. But mainly the thing that the people love the most is the success rate versus coverages, how often these guys are getting open against man, zone, press, how often they are getting open on each route type. I mean, you know this, Chuck. All your very intelligent listeners know this. You know, wide receiver production is so inherent on other factors and so dependent on other variables. The goal with reception perception, what my goal was 10 years ago and is still to this day, is to try to isolate wide receiver performance from those surrounding variables.
Yeah, it's a worthy cause. I think it's difficult, but that's kind of, my favorite stuff to read. If you try to just block out as much as you can, right? Just to try and, like you said, isolate how people are performing, irrespective of their teammates, which can be difficult to do. But I think it's always a worthy goal, just in terms of like talent evaluation and projecting what's possible moving forward.
Can I break some news to you on this show right now?
Sure, go ahead.
It's wide receiver related, so it makes sense. According to Adam Schefter, 7-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Julio Jones is signing a 1-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles, per sources.
Let's go. I'm going to the game this weekend.
Oh, well, there you go. You'll be able to see your guy in person. Yeah, Eagles have just confirmed it too. So shoot, I did not see that one coming.
Hell yeah. I love Julio. I think he's washed as hell, but he's like my favorite Falcon ever. So I'm kind of surprised that they made this move. Did someone get hurt?
Devontae Smith's ego hurt after, a rough couple stretches of games from a production standpoint? Probably not. But yeah, interesting. I mean, they don't have a ton of depth, right? After AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Those two guys are awesome. They're, I think both like superstar level talents. But, Olamide, Zaccheaus, Quez Watkins, these other guys, they don't have like a ton of depth there. But I'm sure Julio's just ring chasing here and they're looking for like one more dimension. But it is pretty random.
Yeah, pretty random. I hope he gets his ring, because
that's right.
Let's not hash. We don't have to,
right.
Go back.
No comment.
No comment. But let's move on to some receivers that are good today. Trade deadline's coming up. Like I said, we're going to go through a few receivers and just kind of talk about the percent chance that they'll get traded and what's a good landing spot for them, plus what it would take to get them. So let's start with one that I really don't think would ever happen. Like, I would eat this microphone that's in front of me if it happened. Justin Jefferson, all-world wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, probably like one of the most valuable assets an NFL team can own over the next few years, just due to his age and his production. He's out for at least the next 3 weeks with a hamstring injury, because he missed one since he's been put on injured reserve. And, Adam Schefter, he kind of hinted, well, if things really start to go south, you might not see him for the rest of the season, which makes sense. I mean, if you're not playing for anything, what are you going to risk someone that valuable for? What do you think is the chance that he gets traded to another team before the deadline?
Like 0% chance. I'm with you that I'll eat my microphone too. We can both, we can fire up the Zoom again and we can do a live stream. Yeah. Like a Yahoo sponsored live stream. We'll both eat our microphones if Justin Jefferson gets traded.
Yeah. So 0% chance. Now, I think the more interesting question is, what would it take to get him? I don't even know if 2 first-round picks could get it done, because I feel like that's what we've seen with, some of the more recent trades for stars, a little 2 first-round picks with Jalen Ramsey. I think Stafford was 2 first-round picks too. I don't know if I would do that if I was the Vikings.
No, I mean, and also from a receiver standpoint, right? Like we've seen AJ Brown with the Eagles, we just talked about, he got traded for like a first and a third, right? And then Steph Diggs, same thing, was like a first, a third, and a fifth. And those are the only guys that would be in like the same universe as, well, I guess Davante Adams, but he was older, right, when he got traded. He was a first and a second, I think. So still, this guy is in the prime of his career. He's, I think, we talked about the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL with Tyreek Hill and CMC so far this season. I think he has to be in that conversation as well. So, yeah, because you'd have to turn around and give him like $30 million a year or whatever, like right away as soon as the deal is done. And it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like,
no.
If the Vikings are going to be bad the rest of the year, which I think is certainly possible. I know they won on Sunday, but they beat Tyson Bagent and the Bears. That doesn't count. And it was the defense that really got it done. I still have serious questions about their offense without Justin Jefferson. They're not going to be a good team this year. They could be in position to draft a young quarterback, and like you drop a young quarterback on a roster with Justin Jefferson, you're feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. You got some guys that can perform well on the offensive line. Like there's way worse situations for a rookie quarterback to walk into than potentially walking in and being handed the keys to this offense. And plus, even a head coach that people respect in Kevin O'Connell. So,
I think O'Connell's a really good offensive designer and play caller. And I just think, honestly, tanking culture has like seeped its way too far into the NFL right now. Whereas like you're like not even a halfway decent team at this point of the season. Like you should just tear it down, trade all your assets. Like, I mean, number one, shut up. Nobody does that. Even the Cardinals, everybody thought they're going to be doing that. And they're a plucky little team. They're not good, but they're a plucky little cute team. They're fine. They're not going to probably be the worst team in the NFL. The Texans, everybody like, what are you doing trading away next year's first round pick? Because you're going to be terrible this year. Well, they might win that division because CJ Stroud is that good. These teams are not just going to suddenly, even if you're going to have a bad year, you don't just immediately start trading all of your assets. Some teams and some players, sure, but not like a Justin Jefferson level asset. That's ridiculous.
No, yeah. This trade would make no sense for the Vikings to the point where, like, if I was the Vikings and someone called me, hey, what would it take to get Justin Jefferson off your hands? Like, we're starting non-negotiable 3 first-round picks. Like,
right, forget it.
As far as first-round picks can stretch, that's what I need, because that's literally how good he's been. I want to ask you something as someone who's evaluated his game. Does he have any weaknesses to his game?
No, like not like a true consistent weakness. Every now and again, he's not a perfect player, right? Like he'll have a failed contested catch attempt or something like that. But he was number 1 in success rate versus press last year. He saw, for reception perception, he saw more double coverage than I've ever charted since 2014. Like I think he's a truly transformative type of talent. So I wouldn't say he has any true weakness in his game. No.
Okay. Let's move on to someone who I think I still be a little surprised if this happened, but I do think there's a much higher chance than Justin Jefferson. Raiders wide receiver, Davante Adams. I kind of get why the Raiders might want to trade Davante Adams. Like they don't really seem to have as much assets as, the Vikings moving forward, just in terms of young pieces. Like I think what makes the Viking situation attractive for a young quarterback is, you can get your Justin Jefferson plus your Jordan Addison, and these are guys that you can all kind of grow up with for the next 4 or 5 plus years, however long, that maturation process takes. But for the Raiders, I kind of think this is a team that, outside of Max Crosby, I think everyone should probably be open for business because they just seem way, way farther away than where the Vikings are. And also you have to worry about Davante Adams' age. Like by the time if you draft a rookie quarterback and by the time that guy gets up and running, is Davante Adams still going to be Davante Adams? If someone offers you a first-round pick for Davante Adams, I feel like that's something you might have to listen to, just given where you are organizationally and just where things are generally. The vibes are pretty bad in Vegas right now. I think that's kind of an understatement.
Yeah, right. The Heat seems to be pretty salty He doesn't seem to have anything positive to say in media appearances. He's even openly said, like, this is not what I signed up for. I'm not quite sure what he thought he was signing up for, other than to play with his buddy Derek Carr, which I get that is disappointing. He immediately gets traded the year after, but that's kind of... It wasn't as if Derek Carr was like an unblemished, untouchable starter to begin with. So it's not totally surprising that he's gone the year after. And yeah, the Raiders aren't good. The Raiders haven't been good for a very long time, consistently at least. So I'm not totally sure what he thought he was signing up for, but obviously this is not it. I'm sure he doesn't love playing for Josh McDaniels. Does anybody really love playing for Josh McDaniels? Even last week they won the game, but he like bolted out of there without even, talking to the press, and allegedly without taking a shower, was what I was hearing from which is unlike him. So
should be unlike anybody.
Should be unlike anybody. Yeah, that's pretty questionable. But so again, it's weird, and the vibes are not great. I think he would certainly want to get traded. If you're the Raiders, right, like if you're Josh McDaniels, you probably want to win the rest of the season. I think obviously he's going to keep you at a certain level of competency is Davante Adams, because like Jacoby Myers is one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. That guy's really good route runner, just a solid player. Jimmy, when he's out there, going to give you a certain level of competency, and like they have a decent running back too in Josh Jacobs. So I think they're probably almost too good with Davante Adams there to totally flop into like a top 3 draft pick. But if they wanted to sell him, there are a lot of teams I think would be interested.
Yeah. What do you, I know what team that I think would be a good fit. And I think they just played and won last night on Monday Night Football. I would love to see the Cowboys try and make a trade for this. Let's go all in. I don't know how the cap situation will work, but I kind of feel like they're missing the piece.
Yeah,
a little bit. It's like they're close to having a good passing game. They're really close to having a super complete wide receiver core. I think what I feel bad about is the Michael Gallup injury. I don't know if he's ever quite gotten back from that, because I've seen people talk crazy about him on the internet. Like, man, he was a pretty good receiver before that injury happened, and since then it hasn't quite been the same. But if you're gonna go for it, right, before you have to pay Dak, before you have to pay Micah Parsons, before you have to work on some of these other contracts on your team, why not make one last swing? Let's call the Raiders, see if they'll take a first-round pick for Davante Adams. I don't think you should really be trading away anything more, because you still have to worry about the future and team to build. But, man, I think that'll be a really good fit with that offense. And obviously Mike McCarthy knows how to get the most out of Davante Adams too.
That's true. The familiarity there would be nice. I think obviously, you have another receiver too that you need to pay in CeeDee Lamb, a guy who has already kind of like rolled his eyes at his own lack of involvement this year. You probably have to consider that at a certain point. It does make sense. It would probably be a pure rental situation for the Dallas Cowboys, but that would obviously be a spot, because I'm with you, man. I was such a big Michael Gallup fan, but it just has not been the same. And sometimes that happens with these guys, right? Like, even if they can recover from the injury physically, they can never really recover from the injury mentally. And even if you go through more off the field, and like the broadcast kind of alluded to that last night, that the mental part of it might be there too. I think the same thing about a guy like Rashad Bateman in Baltimore, who was another player I thought was a really promising young dude, but just doesn't seem to have come back well from his injury so far this year. I think the Ravens are a spot to consider, even though they made a lot of investments at the wide receiver position. I don't think that those guys like Bateman and Beckham rotating at the X receiver position, like you could stick Davante Adams in there. The spot that I think would be great for him is the Lions. I think if Detroit wanted to be really aggressive at the trade deadline, because I mean, I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. The guy I think is in the superstar tier for wide receivers, but he plays a totally different position than where you'd want to use Davante Adams again as that perimeter X receiver. Josh Reynolds has given them nice play as the outside guy, but I think we're talking about Davante Adams here, right? Like that is a big tangible upgrade. I think that takes their offense from a really good unit to potentially top 5 elite unit in the NFL.
That's a really good one. The Lions. Yeah. I just wish, I know Jared Goff has been good, but watching what they've gotten out of their first round pick so far this year is like, damn, bro, you could have packaged that to get up to 3 or something to get Anthony Richardson. you drafted a linebacker who's barely even playing for you, and Jahmyr Gibbs they've already kind of announced that he's going to be a spellback for his career. I don't know. That's a totally different tangent. But
I like Goff. I'm
he's
brave enough to say I like it watching Jared Goff. So I
do too. I do too. But he's also just like, man, if I could do better and I have a chance to do better without blowing all my assets. Yeah. That's how. I mean, kind of like what the Rams did. Good enough to get you to a Super Bowl with the right pieces. But maybe not good enough to win it. One team that I would love to see Davante Adams on that would never, ever, ever happen, Chiefs, would be.
Yeah, of course.
They need something out there. They need something. I just traded for Sky Moore in Dynasty, and I don't feel too great about it.
Why did you do that?
Because my team got blown up by injuries. Like I had Aaron Rodgers, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, and some other guys. So I was just offloading stuff, and I got Sky Moore in a pick for Aaron Jones. So I was like, whatever. It's just
whatever.
Keep it moving.
The weird thing about the Chiefs receiver core, and far be it from me to be here and tell Andy Reid what he needs to do with his offense, but I'm going to do it anyways. Because we're media professionals and we're very qualified to do that. Their receiver usage is weird. Number one, because they rotate these dudes all the time. And the one thing that these guys need is real reps and experience with Pat Mahomes. And the fact that none of them really get 90% of the snaps or anything is kind of weird. I also think why are they using Sky Moore as an outside receiver? I liked Sky Moore as a prospect, but he is a slot player that's probably only going to really run short and underneath routes. And they're kind of having him run big boy vertical routes on the outside, and he's just never going to get open there consistently. And then Rashee Rice is kind of this guy that is popping for them, but they're only really using him as big slot receiver stuff. And watch the Rashee Rice plays. They're the same play every single time. It's just a slant route over the middle where he goes and breaks tackles, which is good. And he looks really good doing it, but they could absolutely use a true X receiver on the backside, and nobody on this roster is going to be that. And obviously Davante would be, but not going to happen.
Yeah. Free Pat Mahomes. Last duo before we move on to some of the younger guys. The Broncos, they're in a situation where I don't really know what you do here, right? Because you're, as our friend Justin Mosqueda pointed out to me last night, the Russell Wilson extension doesn't even really start until next year, which is insane. You are locked in on that Russell Wilson thing, at least until 2025. At the earliest, maybe you can start to get out of it. But even then, you're taking on such a heavy dead cap charge that you have to start tanking. So I think it's kind of imperative for the Broncos just to start getting some cheaper contracts back into their roster cycle by trading off some of these assets. And two of the guys that have come up a lot are Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. First of all, where do you fall on? I feel pretty comfortable saying that Courtland Sutton is a pretty solid receiver. I don't know if he's a 1, but a 2, I think I feel okay about that. Where are you falling on Jerry Jeudy and where his development has come since he was drafted out of Alabama?
Oh boy. Yeah.
Come on, Steve. Steve Smith, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, let me tell you what. Steve Smith knows what he's talking about.
He does.
Yeah, he's right about the Jerry Jeudy thing. And this was a point I talked about a lot on the fantasy podcast this offseason. And by the way, I've been talking about this for 2 years now. I said this on our show 2 years ago when when Russell Wilson got traded there. This is the most overrated receiver room in the NFL because people do this thing where, Jerry Jeudy was drafted really high and Courtland Sutton had a really good 2019 season and now they're not productive. It must be because of the quarterback play because quarterback play hasn't been good in Denver. But those guys can totally be at fault too. And even last year, we had this conversation where Russ is going to Denver and he's going to elevate these guys. I'm like, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf were doing a lot of elevating back there in Seattle because those guys are good. And it was, I was pulling, I had hair back then. I don't anymore. It was I was pulling my hair out, saying, what are we talking about? This is such a massive downgrade going from DK Metcalf as your perimeter receiver down to Courtland Sutton. And then same thing down from Lockett to Jeudy. I think Jeudy, especially, I'm with you. Sutton is, I think, no longer overrated. People view him probably fine. He's a solid starting outside receiver, but Jeudy, man, he was billed as this like great route runner coming into the NFL, and he's just never really developed into that guy. There are flashes, and there are these, practice off-season reps that go crazy on Twitter, but he's not that guy on the field. He's not a consistent player. He's like a solid 3, maybe. So yeah, I think I would be cautious about trading like major assets for Jerry Jeudy at the trade deadline, but I do think these guys are the most likely to get moved.
Yeah, because dude, if you talk to, maybe before the Adam Thielen breakout, but if you would talk to a Panthers fan before Adam Thielen started kind of logging some games, they might say, Jerry Jeudy, we can get our hands on someone like that. And I think it just goes to show like how desperate a fan base is, where you can kind of talk yourself into, well, he was an amazing receiver at Alabama. He was a first-round pick. He's got all this pedigree. Maybe we can be the spot where it works out. Hasn't worked out for them, but maybe it can work out for us.
Maybe it can work for us. And I think it's also, it's one, it's fan desperation for sure. And two, like your draft evaluation carries a long time in the NFL for people who are not watching you play. And like, if you haven't watched Jerry Jeudy play, and literally anytime Jerry Jeudy gets discussed, people show these highlights from like, look at his routes from his freaking rookie season. Like that was 3 years ago at this point. He's not developed into that player. That was my point about him in the offseason when he was getting way steamed up fantasy draft boards. And there's no evidence right now in the NFL that Jerry Jeudy is like that guy. I think he could upgrade a receiver room maybe, but he's nothing close to like a number 1 receiver or anything.
Yeah, I think he's closer to like a wide receiver 3, honestly, like on a good team, which is, I feel like that part has probably been tough for him to accept, but I think it's time for him to kind of split ways with Denver. And dude, if I know it hurts, but like, dude, Denver, if you can get like a 6th or a 5th round pick for him, it's not nothing. It's not nothing, because they got to start restocking that room, or really just the roster in general, because they have fallen off a whole cliff. All right, let's zoom through some young receivers, right? We're going to check on some rookies. We're going to check on some sophomores. But the first guy that I want to talk to you about is someone who had a very, very bad play to end the game last night against Dallas. Quentin Johnston, who I honestly didn't realize until going into that game, has done like nothing this year. Like he's barely even played. He's got 6 catches for 44 yards for the whole season. He went 0 for 2 last night on his targets, including the game-sealing pick, which it probably should have been pass interference if we're going to keep it a buck.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, he got shoved. He literally got shoved out the way. Like extended arm shoved, and then Gilmore caught the pass. But I will say, just as, my inner caveman is also a very real person who matters inside of my brain. Yo, muscle him out of the way. Try to make a play on the ball. Do something. What for the limited snaps that you've seen from Quentin Johnston, why is this not working? Like, why is he not really getting to the game plan?
This conversation probably could last like 15 minutes, and we won't make it last 15 minutes. But I think
that's what she said.
Anyways, I think number one, the lack of physicality, like you said, has been an issue in his game dating back to his collegiate career, right? At TCU, that was the big criticism of him, was he was not like consistent at the catch point. He didn't, battle through contact. He didn't extend his arms. He was not a good contested catch receiver. I think the Chargers drafted him and viewed him as a developmental player. Like I said in the summer that he was going to end up playing as the number 4 receiver behind Josh Palmer. I don't think Josh Palmer is like a star or like a plus starter or anything, but he's a guy that's been in the system, and Quentin is a developmental player. He didn't run like real NFL routes in college. And number 2, I think, and this is the most important thing, is they want him to be something I think that he's just not. Where, you watched him at TCU, he was like a run after catch threat. I don't think he's going to be a run after catch threat in the NFL. And I think the Chargers want him to be like a downfield vertical receiver. But what did I just say about the contested catch stuff? Like he can't do that. And he's really struggling just as a route runner right now. Like I looked at the game prior to the bye, the Raiders game, lined up outside on 81.8% of his snaps there. Really struggled with man coverage, 58% success rate, struggled with press, 28.6% success rate. It's one game, but there's just no evidence right now that he can be like a guy who's going to consistently give them good reps. And like, they didn't even play him as the exclusive 3 coming out of the bye. They rotated like Keelan Doss and other guys with him. So I like I said, I think he's a developmental player that's just like learning how to play receiver at the NFL level. And, based on the way he played in college, I actually don't really think it's that big of a surprise.
Yeah. I remember when they drafted him, I was like, damn, I feel like that's a little redundant with what Keenan Allen has become as an old man. But
he's just not the technician that Keenan Allen is. Like, he's not a guy that's played in the NFL for like 10 years or something like that. So he's honestly a little bit what they want him to be, I think, is a Mike Williams replacement long term. And you can question whether it was a smart idea to draft a guy to do that, who's never shown any evidence that he could be that guy. But also, you're like a win now team that wants to win right away. Like, why wouldn't you take a speed guy like Zay Flowers who could take the top off and like make plays after the catch and like has a translatable skill set to do that? You could argue whether it's stupid that they shouldn't have even taken a developmental receiver, but I think that's what they wanted. They wanted to be a long-term Mike Williams replacement, and now that Mike Williams is injured, they need him to be a right now Mike Williams replacement. I just don't think he's ready to be that.
Yeah, that's never really been his game. But let's move on to someone you just mentioned, Zay Flowers. I absolutely love what he's done with the Ravens so far. Maybe a little bit of the dropsies, but maybe that's just what happens when you go play in Baltimore, because that seems to happen to all their receivers.
Yeah.
But man, I think he's been just exactly what that offense needed to a degree, just in terms of maybe not the dependability with the hands all the time, even though I kind of think that's a fake problem for him. It just, you just got to deal with it.
Drops are random.
Drops are random. Yeah. And look, like I just said, every one of the Ravens drop passes. Like, that Pittsburgh game is one of the best games I've seen Lamar Jackson ever play. And they dropped like 3 touchdowns worth of passes. So, he's not the only one that's doing that over there. But I think just how open he gets, the speed after the catch, the playmaking, and honestly, dude, for a little guy, like he'll go in there and he'll take some hits too. Like, I'm really impressed with what I've seen from Zay so far. And I don't know why I was just like a little nervous about what this fit with Lamar would be, because, I feel like they had tried to put some smaller speed guys around Lamar and it hasn't worked so far. But Zay just appears to be a different cat, and it's worked out really well so far for Baltimore, Lamar, and Zay.
Yeah, tough as nails, which I think I really like Marquise Brown as a player, but I think he's a different kind of smaller speed player. And in week 1, right, like they had all this gadget stuff in place for Zay Flowers, where he was doing a lot of like create a touch type stuff, screens, sweeps, and like, all that type of stuff. But you also saw him like run real big downfield routes, like big boy NFL routes. I sampled weeks 1 and weeks 4 for reception perception, and 42.8% of his routes in those 2 games were comebacks, outs, posts, and corner routes, like real big boy outbreaking routes. And he runs those just as well as he does like the gadgety stuff. So I think there's a lot on the table left for Zay Flowers. And right now, I think it's not even close. He's been the best of the round 1 rookie receivers.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that, kind of manifests itself over the next, not just this season, but the next couple seasons. Because one of the hard things to do once you pay your quarterback that much, you have guys like Roquan Smith making a lot of money, Ron Stanley making a lot of money, Marcus Williams making a lot of money. You have to hit on some of these draft picks. And it looks like they've done a pretty good job with Zay Flowers so far. And I'm excited just to see where this goes for them moving forward. I think maybe the most interesting rookie receiver so far, and this is the last one we'll talk about before we get to some older guys, Puka Nacua. The question here is simple. Like, what did people miss to make him go so late in, congruence with how he's produced so far?
I don't remember. Did we talk about Puka in any of the draft episodes we did together? I don't
think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think the biggest thing with him was there were injuries, right? Like, that kind of wrecked his collegiate profile and stuff. So I think that's probably a part of it, right? But I mean, he was a really good player. Like, his prospect profile and reception perception was really good, could beat man coverage, and was kind of like a very rugged player. They would do some like rush attempt stuff with him at BYU. They would get him out in space. I really liked him as a prospect. Obviously, I didn't expect him to do what he's done so far, but I thought he was probably like more of a round 3 player than a day 3 guy. So I liked him as a player. I think he just wasn't a flashy prospect. I think that's probably if you're not a flashy player, you're not like the fastest, you're not the most explosive, you're just kind of like a rugged, solid player who's a good route runner and can beat man coverage, but you also have injury issues. You're kind of like destined to fall through the cracks. And I also think like he's a perfect system fit for what they want to do in LA, and pretty similar with like Cooper Kupp too. Not that they do the same things, they don't play the same position, but I don't know that Cooper Kupp would be as successful as he's been with the Rams with any other team, and maybe Puka Nacua is kind of the same way.
It was funny because when he was on that tear before Cooper Kupp got back into the lineup, I was like, damn, like what the hell did I miss? And I watched the tape. I'm like, I mean, it's not like, I don't even know if the evaluations were all that wrong, but because he's not, super fast. He doesn't have the most refined game, but he's there. The timing's always great with him and Stafford. And I think there's obviously some merit. If your quarterback wants to throw to you 20 times in a game, you're doing something right. Like
Stafford is also the kingmaker, dude. Like, I mean, Calvin, right? These are not the same level players, Puka Nacua, but like Calvin Johnson had a historic season with him. Like Kenny Galladay had crazy seasons, like Marvin Jones, and if Stafford trusts you, if you're at the breakfast table, you are going to get like in the good graces. And clearly that is the case with Puka. Yeah.
Fed. Yeah. So I like it. I think he's a fun player. I know the Rams were hyping him up in training camp, but I think even this has got to exceed what they were expecting for his rookie year, and honestly, maybe even for a couple of years down the road.
100%.
Because it was like some rookie like Anquan Bolden type where he was catching 10 yards, 10 passes a game. I think he had one game with like 15 or 13 catches. It's pretty outrageous. Before we get out of here, there's a couple sophomore receivers that I want to talk about. The first, I can't not talk about the Falcons on here. Drake London. I'm so happy that the past couple weeks have happened and he's become more of a part of the passing game. I think you could still have a lot of complaints about where the passing game is as a whole right now, but guys like Kyle Pitts is showing up, and Drake London, I think he's a stud and kind of perfect for what they want to do on offense. So I'm not really excited. I'm not surprised to see that he's had this, kind of explosion over the past couple of weeks. But what have you made of his play in what's been a largely terrible Atlanta Falcons passing game?
Yeah, I love Drake London. Big fan. I think the thing that's been left on the table with him, and some of this I think is almost all of it is a Desmond Ridder thing, is like Arthur Smith's offense. They have these big over routes on play action and stuff like that. And like Desmond either is late on, like he needs to pull the trigger. Like a lot of times it's like, there are throws available, like just pull the trigger and get it to Drake London on these big crossers on play action. I think those are still like meat left on the bone, but I've always been a big fan of Drake London. One, because obviously, big catch radius and stuff like that, but he's a really underrated, smooth underneath and intermediate separator. So I think the sky is kind of the limit for him. And, I just hope they can figure out a quarterback situation. I don't think Kirk Cousins is getting traded at the deadline, but this is the team I'd love to see him with, even if it's just on a trial basis this year and like, hey, let's feel each other out and see if you like it here. Maybe honestly, he'll probably be their quarterback next year in free agency as Arthur Smith tries to salvage this thing. So get ready for Kirk.
Look, as long as it's not a first or even a second round pick, I'm cool. It might be hard to get Kirk for a third, but just don't trade a first. And I feel like if you can't get Kirk, then you either ride it out with Ridder or just go balls to the wall and try to get Kyler. I don't know. I'm not in.
Yeah.
Like I've seen people say, "Oh, trade for Tannehill." I'm not in. I don't want.
No, dude. Tannehill's cooked, but I think that Kirk Cousins actually would be a great like trigger man for this offense. But that is definitely my Drake London bags. As a Drake London bag holder, I'm hoping for that. But yeah, I think Drake London's a great player. And probably going to be a little underrated by the end of the season just because of the way, as you mentioned, the offense functions.
I need Desmond Ridder to just come on. Let's go back to that Texans performance. That was great. More of that. Please.
I'm losing faith. If I had any to begin with.
Yeah. I just thought he could be like, could he be like QB 18 and do a little pre-Harbaugh, or like right when Harbaugh got to San Francisco, when he had Alex Smith throwing for like 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and everyone had their mind blown. Like that's kind of what I was hoping for, but I think we're not even quite there yet. So we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's a long season to go. I just need my highlights by the end of the season. Let's hit on one more. One that we talked about before the show. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver for the Commanders. What is interesting to you about his situation and where the Commanders are right now?
Well, number one, he's been like a horrible fantasy pick this year because he's just really done nothing, from a statistical standpoint, other than the one touchdown to almost push the game to overtime against the Eagles. It's weird, man. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this offense so far, because I think Jahan Dotson's a really, really good player, and he showed it last year, and he showed it at Penn State. Like, I mean, it wasn't like this guy's a flash in the pan. And usually when that happens, it's like, okay, look, he had the one drop against the Falcons, and that was overall like probably his worst game of the season. But other than that, like he's, again, like I said, a solid player who you watch him in the first few weeks of the season, like he's getting open. Terry McLaurin, I think, is a fringe top 10 receiver. I put him in the top 10 because I'm just a big fan of his. I think he's that level of player. And then like Curtis Samuel I'm like the long standing Curtis Samuel fan. I'll be the last one to sell my real estate on Curtis Samuel Island. I think he's a really good player. And Logan Thomas has bounced back better than I could have expected at the tight end position. So those guys are already like a thin target or like a wide target distribution. And then they were doing like mixing in De'Ami Brown and like Byron Pringle and Jamison Crowder in the year 2023. I just don't know why you'd want to do that from a personnel standpoint when you have invested in these top three receivers. And by the way, like your quarterback is on pace to take 96 sacks this year, which is, as we noted in the pre-show, it's actually an improvement from the week prior. I just think this offense is looked pretty broken to me. I've not been very impressed with the Eric Bieniemy offense so far in Washington.
Yeah, it's been okay to me, like from a structural standpoint. So I have not been as impressed with Sam Howell as I think some people happen to. I know sometimes the raw stats can be okay. Like if you're talking about a first year quarterback who's on pace for 4,200 yards, 26 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. I mean, that's something that you'll probably take most of the time. But to me, he leaves so much meat left on the bone. And it's not even just from like inaccuracies. So I don't really think he's all that inaccurate. There have been some bad misses this year, but like the arm talent for him is fairly real. Dude, the pocket presence, the pocket management is so bad. Like to the point where what you said before the show, he's on pace for 96 sacks this year. 96. So think about if you're just looking at those plays where if we go through the game log for the past 5 games, he's been sacked 4 times, 9 times, 5 times, 5 times, 5 times. That's coming back on the quarterback. And it makes me think like, okay, well, if you're willing to get hit and sacked this much, think about the plays where you aren't getting sacked, where you're putting your eyes down and you're trying to make something happen, and maybe you don't get sacked, but these plays kind of add up where you're just playing a whole lot of offense out of structure. I definitely think some of Bieniemy's passing game could be a little bit better, a little bit more creative. They don't really have a whole lot of easy buttons that they're pressing right now, like they did when he was a part of the Chiefs. And interesting enough, I don't think the Chiefs have a whole lot of easy buttons that they're able to press right now either. Maybe they kind of need each other, but still, it's kind of hard to generate like a consistent passing game when your quarterback is willing to get sacked a bunch and thinks they're a lot faster than they actually are. Like Sam Howell, he's the king of, putting his eyes down. And then sometimes young quarterbacks do this thing like, where they're trying to run away from a rush and they do like a little loop-de-loop in the pocket where they spin around and they end up right back into the face of a defensive lineman. Sam does that a lot. And I think that it seems like it should be a pretty easy thing to fix. Like, yo, you're not really even turning the ball over that much. You've got some good arm talent. Just stop taking the sacks. And I think we could see this thing, start to move up. I don't think the offensive line has been perfect, but when you have, kind of a middling offensive line plus a quarterback that invites a lot of pressures, this is what it ends up looking like. It does suck for Dotson, though, because I'm with you. I think he's so talented, but there's been like no production this year at all. I kind of think it's going to pick up just because he is that guy and there's going to be some volume his way, but it's been tough for him for sure.
I don't mean to say that it's like all Bieniemy's fault, because like if your quarterback is on pace for 96 sacks, and I just can't stop saying that, like there are multiple things wrong here. And like when you're very talented first round wide receiver who had a nice rookie season is just completely unproductive, there are multiple things to blame here, including, like I said, I'm not totally letting Dotson off the hook, right? Like last week, he definitely could have had like a 40-yard gainer that he should have just caught. So there's a lot of factors at play here, but I think I saw our friend Josh Norris say that Sam Howell thinks that as soon as he goes into creation mode, like everybody else is no longer allowed to move, and like he can just maneuver out. That is, when you hear that, think about that next time you're watching Sam Howell. And I swear to God, as soon as I heard Josh say that, I was like, wow, that is exactly how Sam Howell plays. The pocket presence is bad, but I do agree that they've got to give him some more outlets to not put him in those situations. Because again, like sacks are drive killers. Like it just, if he's taking 5 sacks a game, those are probably 5 drives that are just over like that, which is, it's pretty tough to consistently have productive players in your offense when that's happening.
I mean, even think about what they did last week against Atlanta. Like you have one drive where you got the punt return that brought them back to like the 11-yard line. And then another drive where they started the 27 after an interception. Like I think that's kind of where they ended up winning within the margins. But I'm also coping as a Falcons fan who wanted them to take lead of the division last week, and they had a chance and they didn't do it. So whatever. Matt, let's get you out of here. Let's get me out of here. Yeah. You got anything you're working on you want to let people know about?
Yeah, listen, would love if people subscribe to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show, our fantasy podcast here at Yahoo. I host it every day. We do a lot of different things on the show. We're trying to stand out in a very crowded fantasy podcast space, as I'm sure you guys are doing here on the NFL side. We just taped the episode today with Austin Eckler, so that'll be out by the time people listen to this, I assume.
Every day?
Well, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
I told you, man. By the way, I also host another podcast, Reception Perception, and receptionperception.com. Would love it if people check that out. If you just can't get enough me, there are a lot of places to find it.
Yeah. All right. So thanks to Matt for coming on. Just remember, you can send us a voicemail. Send one to either me or Jason Fitz at speakpipe.com/0blitz. That's speakpipe.com/0blitz. You can ask me a question, make fun of me, send me your favorite hottest take. I'm sure Dolphins fans have a lot to say to me because I said they should stop crying about the Tua versus Herbert stuff. And then they pulled up some tweets of me saying, this is why we're crying, because I didn't think that Tua was going to be great with Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle. That's on me, but you guys are still babies. We'll be back with another episode on the Exempt List every Tuesday. You can tune in tomorrow for inside coverage with Jason Fitz, Charles Robinson, Jory Epstein. I am Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts. You can find Matt Harmon on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. And you can find our producer, Stone Rochelle, behind the glass. You can find him on Twitter at SJ Rochelle. The NBA season is right around the corner. It's never a better time to sign up for a fantasy basketball league. Draft your league at yahoofantasy.com or in the Yahoo Fantasy app. And we will see you next week.